We're back, and I'm pleased to say we are able to continue this extraordinarily timely conversation with a man who has not only thought deeply about what freedom requires, but he's put his life on the line repeatedly and in some of the most dangerous places on the planet to protect ours. His name is Charles Sam Faddis. You can follow his work at andmagazine.com's Substack. An extraordinarily important resource, as of course is its author. Sam, you were laying out for us the predicate, which is that a constitutional republic like ours, predicated on liberty, whose very first amendment to that Constitution speaks to the importance of freedom of speech and guarantees it, that's now under assault. There's a fellow that you have profiled at End Magazine and at accountabilityinitiative.org
Right.
about what he's doing in the White House as a special assistant to the President of the United States. Tell us about this chap, Joshua Geltzer, where he comes from, what he's up to, and its implications for this agenda, among others.
Right. Well, we should keep in mind here in this context, Frank, the truly dangerous people in any kind of Marxist revolution, and that's really what we're looking at, are the intellectuals, the people, so-called intellectuals, the people that provide the intellectual underpinning, the justification. It's not the guys pulling the triggers on the firing squad. It's the guys who actually create the environment in which that can happen. And I know this sounds potentially very inflammatory and extremist, but that's exactly where we are.
That's where we are.
And Joshua is one of those guys. He is a terrifying individual. He's the special assistant to the president for domestic extremism, I think. And his whole
Domestic
agenda,
extremist, I think it's violence is in there somewhere too, but it seems as
yeah,
though
you're
he's casting that net more widely than just violence. No?
exactly. And look, he's been in there since Joe sat down in the Oval Office. He came in and he's the nerve center for this whole thing. And what he says coming out of his mouth is terrifying. What he says is, in effect, to boil it down, words are the equivalent of violence, and
Mm.
you don't have to blow anything up to be a terrorist. You don't even have to be planning to blow anything up to be a terrorist or an extremist. If you hold ideas and espouse them that he considers to have the potential, he doesn't agree with, that has the potential to create violence in his mind, and that's all that matters, what he thinks.
Yeah,
And
and that's a
therefore,
pretext for acting against you in some way, and
yeah,
and Tucker Carlson in reporting on this development with this so-called disinformation governance board made the observation, which I think we all better be focused on, which is this isn't just some independent entity or agency. Even this is a feature now of the Department of Homeland Security, in which,
yes.
as he's observed, you got a lot of people and a lot of ammunition and guns that are, law enforcement who can act on direction from, the Jankowitzes or the Geltzers in the administration when they see fit. And talk a little bit about, Sam, how this is now being put into motion, not just in the Department of Homeland Security, but also in the Defense Department, with predictable and very very unsettling effects.
Right. So, I mean, the Department of Defense has basically been, as you just indicated, at the forefront of what we're now seeing on a broader governmental basis. They have effectively this guy Garrison now, who is essentially their commissar, and
Bishop Garrison,
Bishop Garrison,
not
and
not a clerical bishop, but that's his first name, and he's running the countering violent extremism program at the Defense Department, right?
exactly, and he's been in place now for many, many, many months, and they are actively hunting for political opponents of the president, and they are employing some incredibly sophisticated technical tools. So they have a variety of tools that they use to search the internet, search social media, and then identify you as holding positions that are contrary to the prevailing wisdom, and then you can be eliminated and you can be removed from the Department of Defense. This is not fantasy and it's not speculation. it is happening right
Mm.
now. In fact, they
So
actually not
men and
they will
women in uniform and civilian, uh, I guess,
yeah.
employees as well, are all being purged. Is that the right term for it? On the basis of not holding the politically uh, acceptable positions or views. These would be people who are, Trump voters or otherwise simply, critical of an agenda like the one we're talking about.
That is exactly what I'm saying, and it is happening already, and it is happening right now. They will also interfere with your social media searches using software and redirect you away from things you were looking for on Google and feed you directly to sites that push the party narrative. Again, I know that sounds like science fiction, but it's a program called Moonshot. It is in place and it is active. So you think you're trying to find the truth, and what you are being fed is the approved government narrative. This is straight out of 1984, except Orwell probably couldn't imagine the sophistication of
Yeah.
some of what's going on.
Yeah, and that brings me back to something we touched on a moment ago, Sam. Software is being used by private sector entities as well, albeit it seems very much aligned with what these government entities and individuals are up to. Talk a little bit about Google and what it's
Right.
doing to manipulate its users.
Well, this is one of these examples that sounds a little bit silly until you actually think about it. And then you're like, my God, this is terrifying. Now, if you are typing things into Google, Google will actually autocorrect. People understand, corrects your spelling or something as you go along.
Drives
It
me
will
crazy.
now autocorrect to replace your language with approved woke language. So if you try to type
Wow.
policeman, it will tell you it is police person, and it would become much more insidious. So
Hmm.
this is not like it could happen one day. It's happening right now under our feet.
Yeah. So this is the context in which we're seeing Elon Musk trying to inject himself into another of the social media giants, Twitter. That drama is still playing out, to be sure. But Sam, I want to, come back to something I talked about in that opening
Mhm.
commentary. You're a member, as I said, of our Committee on the Present Danger of China. You've been following very closely what the Chinese Communist Party does to use its various instruments of surveillance and you know uh, data mining and artificial intelligence, essentially to have 24/7 surveillance monitoring, whatever you want to call it, of everybody in their society. If the next step in this progression here in the United States, teamed up with vaccine passports or whatever you want to call them, perhaps, is to get thought police engaging in that kind of surveillance of Americans, are we very far from ultimately, following in line with the Chinese model more generally to our horrific detriment?
No, in fact, most of the people we're talking about here will tell you that they admire the Chinese and think we should be more like them. And anybody can turn on their television now and see video of what's going on in Shanghai. Well, that's your future, folks, where you have a government that has drones hovering over top of you, telling you not to breathe so heavily and go back inside, and is literally welding the doors of your apartment building shut.
Yeah.
And you have no control and no rights whatsoever. That's the future these people imagine.
And that's now been going on for weeks in Shanghai. It's moving into Beijing. I'm told there's
Right.
some 400 million Chinese now under one form of this lockdown or another.
Right.
We can't let that happen here, Sam Faddis, and I know patriots like you will be in the vanguard of resisting this. Thanks for the work you do at Substack. Thanks for your visits with us each week, and Godspeed in mounting the resistance to what these guys have in mind for us. We'll be joining you in that regard. Next up, we'll speak with Joe Bosco a bit more about what's going on in China and what it means for you on the other side of this very short break.